Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I'm going to go ahead and tell you up front, this one's going to be a little all over the map. I mean, it has just been one of those weeks. First of all, I've got a whole flock of crows, probably about 100 yards from here. They're just making all kinds of a racket. And so if you hear anything weird, it's crows. Crows are an amazing bird, by the way. I absolutely I have a strong fondness for crows and ravens and all that whole family. Um, I have at certain times in my life had them almost as pets, and I've done a lot of crow hunting. I do enjoy crow. They are smart animals. They're incredibly smart birds. They play games. They will actually get in trees and drop things on you just for fun. They will collect shiny objects. They will recognize you. A crow knows your face. And if you are a crow hunter, they'll tell their friends, and you will have a very hard time hunting crows. I remember one time reading that Ed Zern was a great old outdoor writer, and he had this formula for crow hunting. Basically, it took 127 men in costume, in disguise. Two would walk into a blind, one would walk out, three would walk into a blind, two would walk out, five would go hide in the bushes, six would replace it, on and on to trick the crows. It's wonderful. You can look up it online. Just get on your favorite search engine and type in Ed Zern crow hunting, and you're in for a good laugh. He was an excellent humorist and outdoor writer back when men were men and writers were writers, and yeah, we don't have much of that anymore. But wow, what a week! Um, wow. Okay, so I have been back and forth across the state of North Carolina from one end to the other a couple of times, and North Carolina is a big state. Trust me. You go from Murphy to Manteo, you have put in some driving. And the traffic is crazy these days. People are either homicidal or suicidal. I have no idea which. It is nuts out there. Um, I've had roof work done. I've had hammering, lack of sleep. I have sold some books this week, and I just want to thank you so much for buying my books. It means a lot to me. I don't know if I can quantify it. I'm doing what I've always Well, I can't say I'm doing what I've always dreamed of doing because I never thought I'd be doing this. The way I grew up in the mountains, everybody used herbs. Everybody grew in a garden. Everybody went out in the woods. Everybody used medicinal herbs. I did not realize my knowledge was valuable until COVID came around and everybody started asking me questions like, well, you grew up with herbs and you know this. And I'm like, well, yeah, actually I do. And it kind of hit me that other people didn't. But I want you to understand one thing. When you spend $10 to buy my ebook or about $20 to buy the paperback, don't you ever think that that doesn't mean something to me. Um, I don't like to talk about a lot of personal stuff, but there have been times in my life when I lived on $10 a week. And I mean, from a very early age when my dad left, and various times through my life, I've told you before how I had a business in 2008 and it went down and went bankrupt, and I ended up in incredible debt and worked just very, very hard to pay everything back and pay everything off. When you take $10 out of your pocket and buy my book, um, it means more to me than you can ever know. And I've gotten so many good reviews and people telling me how much they appreciate my book and how valuable it is to them and how I should be charging two or three times more. But I want you to understand there have been times from many times throughout my life when I was 5 years old, when I was 15 years old, when I was 30 years old, when I was living on $10 a week. And I'm not kidding. So when you do that, it is so appreciated. It is so appreciated. Now, the only thing I always try to avoid politics. I always try to avoid politics, and a lot of people would probably say you're not doing a very good job, and I understand that. Something happened this week that made me so mad. So before I talk about it, I'm going to balance it out. All right. The Braves are going to the World Series, y'all, for the first time since 1999. Now, I know not everybody's a baseball fan anymore, and that's a shame. We need more fathers in the home, and we need more people playing baseball. Baseball is a noble sport. It is the most noble of our American sports. I played them all, and I know, okay? It is a noble sport. I was good at football. I was horrible at basketball, even though I'm 6'4". I was a killer at rugby, believe it or not. I mean, rugby was like football without the pads, and I was a monster on the field. Baseball is a noble sport. It is a wonderful thing. It is a game that can teach so many life lessons. Um, the Braves have just beaten the Dodgers, and they are going to the World Series for the first time since 1999. Now, I know if you're somewhere, well, especially if you're in California, you're a Dodgers fan, or if you're in Philadelphia and you're a Phillies fan or whatever, you don't want to hear about it. But when I was a kid, we lived and died by the Atlanta Braves. I mean, the Braves were on TBS. Yeah, Ted Turner, the radical radical left liberal Ted Turner owned TBS, but he was a baseball fan. He also had a great channel called Turner South for a while, and Turner Classic Movies. The man was, I grew up on his television, and yeah, I really appreciate all he did in that regard. Politics aside. Um, the Braves, I will never forget, I was probably 14 when Chipper Jones was a rookie and they won the World Series, and there was not a single man or woman in the entire southeastern United States that was not an Atlanta Braves fan. Okay. I remember 1999, the last time they went to the World Series. I was in Athens, Georgia. I was with my best friend and another friend. He was kind of a character. And we were at this Italian restaurant. Oh, the best calzones you've ever had. But it was right down on Broad Street, big place. I can't remember the name of it. It started with a P, I think, Permani's or something like that. Big, you know, giant, uh, just open room with this huge widescreen TV in it. And well, it turned out they did not pay to broadcast baseball and they got closed down. But I remember sitting there in 1999 with my best friend watching the Braves win that last pennant game, everybody in the place screaming, jumping up and down. My other friend finishing off everybody's pitcher, so we had to drag him out of there. He had had so much beer. This is like, you know, it's like Christmas Day, for me, the day after the Braves just clinched the pennant. So, that's great. And I've spent a lot of long nights watching baseball this week too, so I'm kind of tired. But now I'm going to get serious for a minute. And like I said, I try so hard to avoid politics. I want herbal medicine to be available for every person in this entire country. I don't care what your politics are. I mean, you want to know how, we'll say, ecumenical I am? All right, yeah. I mean, they say you don't discuss politics or religion, okay? I am a very conservative, very traditional Roman Catholic in an area where Catholics are probably 3/10 of the population. Everybody I know is either Seventh-day Adventist, Jehovah's Witness, or Southern Baptist. Some of the older folks are Presbyterian. Uh, I don't know if you really know. I mean, if you're not from here, you might not understand, but um, Seventh-day Adventists believe everybody who goes to church on Sunday is going to hell. Um, Jehovah's Witnesses don't accept the divinity of Jesus Christ. They think anybody who worships Jesus is going to hell. Baptists pretty much think they got it down, and anybody who isn't Baptist is in trouble. They'll play baseball and basketball games against the Methodists, so they're not going to say the Methodists are going to hell, but they pretty much think they got it down. I can laugh about this because I did go to a Baptist college and I went to a Presbyterian college for a while. Um, Presbyterians don't believe a damn thing, honestly. The Presbyterian Church may as well be the Communist Party of the United States. And yeah, here I am, the lone Catholic out here with somebody coming knocking on my door every few days on their mission trips to tell me that I'm worshiping Satan. Um, and y'all know I'm exaggerating. I'm making jokes, but we all get along just fine. I mean, when I say I'm ecumenical, let me tell you how ecumenical I am. Ecumenical, by the way, it's a word that just means getting along between denominations and religions. I have a friend who's an Egyptian Muslim whose family left Egypt to get away from the radical Muslims that started blowing people up and doing horrible things. And he's an observant Muslim, and he loved the smell of bacon. He loved the smell of pork barbecue and ham. And he asked me one day, "What can I do? This is driving me crazy." I mean, we eat a lot of pork in the South, especially in North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina, 200 years ago, the historian said that North Carolinians were full of ill humors for eating too much pork. We love our pork, trust me. He asked me what he do. I said, "Have you ever tried duck bacon or goose bacon or ham or anything like that?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Will you teach me how to duck hunt?" So I will put a shotgun in a Muslim's hand and go out to the woods and the swamps to hunt. So when I tell you I'm ecumenical, yeah, I will literally put a gun in the hand of someone whose ideology is a little dangerous to mine. And yeah, we do. We get along just fine. So when it comes to politics, I generally try to steer clear of it. I have so many good friends, especially in permaculture and herbal medicine, that are absolutely on the opposite side of the spectrum from me. I mean, communists, basically. But they know their stuff when they're talking about herbs or farming or gardening, and I respect them and I get along with them and I learn from them. I have two neighbors, both of whom actually have, oddly enough, black labs. The dogs are just as sweet as can be, and the guys are great, but they're Biden supporters. Okay, so, we get along. We don't talk politics. We talk food mainly. I can always find equal ground with people on food. But, sometimes this stuff does factor into herbs, to herbal medicine. Last week in the town hall, Joe Biden said what bothers him are people who think about freedom and say, I have the right to kill you with my COVID. And he's enforcing these mandates. Well, first of all, let's just put this in context. COVID in the general population has a 98% survivability rate. That means it has a 2% mortality rate. If you're under the age of 20, you have a better chance of being killed by being struck by lightning than dying of COVID. So it's a complete, utter falsehood. I mean, yeah, you have the right to drive a car. You probably have about a 1 in 20 chance of killing someone with your car. Driving a car is extremely dangerous, okay? If you are unvaccinated, me personally, I've had COVID, okay? I'm not going to get COVID again because I have the antibodies against COVID. Put me in a group of people who are unvaccinated, and they have almost a 0% chance, like 1/10 of 1% chance of catching COVID from me if for some reason I was asymptomatic. And trust me, it wasn't fun. I think I'd know if I had it again. Put me in a room with people who are already vaccinated, and it's supposed to be like 1/10 of 1/10,000th of a percent. You know, there is actually supposed to be a reason to get vaccinated. You get vaccinated so you can't catch COVID. But last week, Colin Powell, who was vaccinated twice, caught COVID and died. So tell me again why I'm supposed to get the vaccine. You know, uh, I think it's a load of crap. Uh, that's my personal opinion. I don't tell people to get vaccinated or not. I have my own moral objections against being vaccinated. One, I've had it. Two, I have a family history of ALS Lou Gehrig's. And I'm not going to take anything that could cause me to die the most horrible death one can possibly imagine. I would literally rather be cut to pieces an inch at a time than have ALS Lou Gehrig's. If you've ever seen that disease, you understand why I'm saying that. My grandfather got ALS after getting his first flu shot. I don't take flu shots. I will not take the COVID shot. mRNA vaccines can cause an immune response. I've had a doctor tell me, he came out, he was all, you got to get the shot, you got to get vaccinated. I said, my grandfather had ALS. He said, don't you get that shot. You cannot get that shot, okay? Doesn't matter, Joe Biden knows it. I have a religious moral objection over the use of aborted fetal cells, okay? And I am Catholic. My own Pope may be a blithering idiot who sticks his nose into things that he should not, over which he has absolutely no authority. But I know, as a practicing Catholic, I cannot do anything to support abortion. Okay, you don't agree with me on that? Fine. I don't care if you're on one side or the other. That's my stance. And as an individual American, that's my choice. See, Joe Biden, he just made light of freedom. You have the freedom. Yeah, I do. I do actually. You see, my family came here in the late 1600s. My family built this country. Barack Obama says you didn't build that. Yeah, my family did build this. I have ancestors in the Revolutionary War. Carols. You ever looked at the Declaration of Independence? Charles Carroll, the only Catholic signer of the Declaration, not directly related, but a cousin. Allens, descendants of Lord Cheshire, gave up a lot to come here. Lord Cheshire, who was directly descendant of like King Richard Lionheart, um, William the Conqueror, Edward the Confessor, that entire branch of the British royal family, they gave up a lot to come here to this country. Thompsons, Scots, bold, fierce, fighting Scots. I mean, I can go down the list. Brissons, Dubuisson. You can say it either way. I mean, it's Brisson in English, it's Dubuisson in French. Yes, they gave up a royal lineage and money to come here and fight. And a whole lot of Native Americans through the Lumbee tribe and the Haliwa-Saponi and the Chicora. My ancestors did, in fact, build this country. They fought in the American Revolution. They died in the American Revolution. They fought in the War of 1812. One of my ancestors actually fought in both the American Revolution and the War of 1812. My great grandfather served in World War One, a Guyton, another French name, a Huguenot, of Huguenot descent, I should say. He fought, and then his job was to bring coffins home to bring the dead to their families. I have my family fought in World War II. My family fought in Korea. My family fought in Vietnam. And yes, my family fought in the Civil War on the side of the South, not because they were slave hunters, but because a war criminal named Ulysses S. Grant came and began burning our farms, having his soldiers rape and kill the women, execute any boy large enough to carry a gun. I don't trust the federal government because my family, who founded this country, has had that government turn on them at least twice during the war. The Whiskey Rebellion, yeah, we were on the wrong side of that one, and the Civil War, which had not a damn thing to do with slavery. Not on our side, it didn't. I know that's a controversial statement, but my family fought for their homes and their family and their land. And you better believe we have a right to say if someone's going to stick a needle in our arms. And I'm mad. I am really absolutely angry. And what makes me even angrier is I'm going to try to watch my language. I'm trying very hard to watch my language. I know a lot of my listeners are people who are homeschoolers. They like for their kids to listen to my show. Their kids get to learn about plants. Their kids get to learn about herbs. That son of a bitch does not have the right to tell anyone in this country they have to get vaccinated. It's not his power in the Constitution. It's not his right. And yes, I will call him a son of a bitch. And I'm going to qualify that because according to Joe Biden, his mother told him that he didn't have to follow the teachings of the church. He didn't have to listen to any authority because he should never trust a man, and the Pope's just a man. Well, the Pope may be just a man, but when the Pope sits there and says, these are the morals that Jesus Christ taught us and put in the Bible, that's not his authority. That's the authority of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, God incarnate. Well, Joe Biden's mother told him he didn't have to believe that. And Joe Biden is the most pro abortion, anti American, anti Catholic president we have ever had. So that son of a bitch will, in my opinion, likely rot in hell beside his own mother. Now, I pray that he will get an awakening and that they'll all end up in heaven one day, as every good Christian should. But in my opinion, let's all say it together. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. That's the most innocuous way I can put it. Let's go, Brandon. Now let's talk about some herbs. Well, you know, I just actually thought of something a few minutes ago. It's kind of funny. From a very young age, maybe I don't even know, 5, 10 years old, I always loved Dean's onion dip and Hidden Valley Ranch dressing. Now, I know y'all are thinking, what the heck does this have to do with herbs? We just listened to him go off on a political rant. But you know what? The best way to get herbs into your diet is through eating them, actually putting them in your diet. I mean, you can eat medicinal herbs. And probably a couple of years ago, I started experimenting with a copycat recipe of Hidden Valley Ranch dressing, in which I use um, sour cream, mayonnaise, and buttermilk as the base. It's very good, very tangy, very nice. A little squeeze of lemon juice gives it a little perked up. A little salt and pepper, okay? Now, what goes into that? Parsley. Parsley's so good for you. Parsley's one of the healthiest herbs there is. I put in oregano. I put in rosemary. I put in garlic. I put in chives. All of the green culinary herbs, antiviral, antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, you name it. So there's a good one. Well, I started thinking about Dean's onion dip today, and just I thought, I don't want to go to the store. I'm sitting here. I'm actually watching a replay of the ball game. I thought, you know what? I've got sour cream. I could probably use some buttermilk, but I don't have any. Next time I will. I've got chives. I've got garlic. I've got onions. I've got dried garlic. I've got dried ramps. Ramps are the wild leeks grow in the mountains of North Carolina. Chopped it up, put it in there, pinch of salt. Yeah, I just copycatted Dean's onion dip with probably the biggest punch of antiviral, antibiotic, antiseptic allium family herbs that you could possibly imagine, and it's absolutely fantastic. And over the course of a year, it's probably going to save me 20 or 30 bucks because every time I get some potato chips, I do like to get some Dean's onion dip. Uh, and I do think the missing flavor from this one is buttermilk. But I'm not even allowed to say there's such a thing as antiviral herbs on YouTube anymore. My videos were removed from YouTube, not because I said don't take the vaccine. I've never once said that. I've said it's your choice. Either because I compared Dr. Fauci to yogurt and Spaceballs, which is just funny. I don't care what anybody says, that's funny. Or because I said there is such a thing as antiviral herbs. Truth is, there are a lot of antiviral herbs, and we're going to talk a whole lot more about that in the coming weeks. But as far as this vaccine mandate, people are losing their jobs. Doctors, nurses, police officers, firemen, losing their jobs because they believe that they actually have the right to say, my body, my choice, not in regard to killing a baby. Apparently, it's your body, your choice if it's killing a baby, but not if you want to not take a vaccine. So many people, they said during the virus, during the whole thing last year, that the healthcare workers were heroes. They were heroes. And we've heard, every anniversary of 9/11, police officers and firemen are heroes. You know who I think are heroes these days? People willing to sacrifice and say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not giving up my freedom. I know this is a controversial statement, but do you realize that, um, okay, if these people were just fired, they would go on unemployment, okay? If 10% of all the doctors and teachers and firemen and, all the, mm, anyone in a corporation over 100 people, it's what Biden said, they have to get vaccinated or they're gone. If 10% of them were to be fired, our unemployment rate would be it's at about 5% now, and they always play with the numbers, but it could be anywhere from 10 to 15% higher than we've seen since the Great Depression. That would be the end of Joe Biden's presidency. That would be the end of a Kamala Harris presidency. That would be the end of everything. It would be everyone in full on freak out mode. So what they're doing is saying, no, you're not fired. We're going to put you on 6 years of unpaid leave in some cases. In other cases, they're saying you quit. Okay, you're not fired. You quit because you made the decision not to take the vaccine. Do y'all have any idea what this is going to mean? We're going to have an unemployment rate that stays at 5%. Everything looks rosy, right? Everything looks just rosy. Um, Inflation going through the roof, gas going up over $3.50, $5. It's $8 a gallon right now in California. And you're going to turn on your 6 o'clock news and they're going to tell you the stock market had closed at a record high. Everything's great. Real unemployment is going to be at depression era levels. Now, can I quantify to you how important herbal medicine is? We could have 10, 15, 20% of the population of the United States, that's 10, 20, 15%, whatever, of 350 million people that suddenly have no insurance. And doctors are now saying, no, you can't come into my office to have a prostate exam or a mammogram if you haven't had the vaccine. If that be the case, we could have 10, 15, 20, who knows what percentage of the population not even being recorded as being unemployed, not receiving unemployment benefits, losing their insurance, absolute pariahs to the system. Y'all, we've got to focus on herbal medicine now like we never have before because a huge swath, maybe a quarter of our population, could be absolutely on their own. I turned on the TV news. Oh, yeah, it's the news. I turned on the news the other day. It was Newsmax. I'm going to tell you, I turned on Newsmax yesterday morning, and I don't know the name of the host. He said his wife was an OBGYN. He said yesterday she performed, I think he said 12 C-sections. This is one of the top gynecological surgeons in the state of New York. And that afternoon she was out of a job because they denied her religious exemption to the vaccine. Think about it that way. Not only will these doctors and nurses and firemen and police officers and who knows who else be losing their jobs, but you can lose your access to a doctor because the doctor lost their job because they didn't want to be shot full of aborted fetal cells or the lines from, you know what I'm saying? Or because they thought, you know what, I have a family history of ALS, or I have you name it, any autoimmune disease, lupus, uh, but just so far beyond that. I think, again, I'm going to say, I think I wrote my book at the right time. Herbal medicine for preppers, homesteaders, and permaculture people. I don't think there's ever been a time in the last 200 years, at least the last 150 years, when this book has been more needed. And you know what? This has already cost me. I mean, it's cost me, you know, like, I don't believe in talking about personal details, especially within the context of a romantic relationship, okay? Things between partners should always stay private. When you go into a relationship, you invest your trust in a person, you should never talk about them to the outside. Okay? So, in very general terms, um, I had about a 3-year relationship with the most beautiful little blonde you can imagine, 30 years old. Um, she's in a very professional job in the healthcare industry. Um, Blonde hair, big blue eyes, looks like a little Barbie doll. I mean, I'm talking like Taylor Swift, but way hotter, okay? This virus mandate comes out, and I told her I can't get the vaccine. And she's like, well, you have to get the vaccine. And I said, why? Well, the president says you have to get the vaccine. I told her everything I just told you, and that was the end of that relationship. Yeah, we had already had issues over me being self-employed, people that work in graduate high school, graduate college, start a career path where everything's supposed to be sequential, don't understand someone who steps out of it and makes their own money, and takes the risks. The risks involved are huge when you're self-employed. But yeah, I've already given up a whole lot, because my ancestors gave up lot more, a whole lot more. And if Joe Biden wants to joke about freedom, he has no business being the leader of the land of the free. And again, we're not exactly the home of the brave anymore, are we? We have given up everything our ancestors fought for because we're afraid of getting a cold, which does not even have as high a mortality rate as the common flu. But yeah, Yeah, I'm really upset about this. And I probably upset a lot of people who are going to listen to this podcast. I may have lost half my audience. Okay, good riddance. You think you can tell another person what to do? You think my ancestors were on the wrong side because we fought for the South? You think my ancestors were on the wrong side because the South owned slaves? Okay, slavery's wrong. I'm telling you right now, slavery is wrong. No human being has the right to tell another human being how to live. Now, where does that put you? You who are dictating what I'm supposed to put in my body. You who are laughing when Joe Biden says fire them all if they won't take the shot. That sounds a hell of a lot like slavery to me. Anyway, let's talk a couple herbs. All right. So, in my book, I have a chapter called Herbs for Disinfecting Wounds. And here's how it goes. Let's say the next priority after controlling bleeding is to prevent infection. This means disinfecting the wound. The nice thing about being an herbalist is that we usually have an alcohol-based tincture on hand. A tincture of any herb that can be used internally and is not a vasodilator would be useful as a simple disinfectant based on the alcohol alone. Now, some herbs are toxic. Okay, let's just put it that way. If you take aconite, wolfsbane, or monkshood, a few drops of that tincture taken internally, and that can be in the mouth or placed into an open wound, will kill you immediately. You will drop dead. Uh, other herbs are vasodilators. They open the vascular system. They increase circulation. You put that in a wound, and you're going to increase bleeding. So you don't want to do that. But the alcohol base of even tinctures that have nothing to do with wounds or disinfecting, the alcohol itself can disinfect the wounds. So if we have a few tinctures on hand, we're usually pretty good. Um, let's see, as I mentioned before, pine is antiseptic. A simple tea of the needles or pitch can be quickly and easily obtained to use as first aid to disinfect wounds. Other trees that can be used are balsam fir, that's AB species, catalpa bark, very interesting tree. We'll get more into that another day. Dogwood, that's Cornus. Cornus Florida is what we have around here, but all the dogwoods are good. Beech, we talked about last week. Walnut, the inner bark and leaves of walnut are nice, really good antiseptic. Walnut's one of our most useful trees. Chinese privet, one of those weedy type plants. Sweet gum, China berry, bayberry, but we're talking Mirica when we're talking bayberry. Poplar, oak, all the oaks. Oak is just a wonderful tree. We talked about that last week. Sumac, we're not, of course, talking poison sumac. We're talking the actual sumac that has the berries that are edible and taste like lemonade. Sassafras, styrax, slippery elm, and Hercules club, which is xanthoxylum, another incredibly medicinal small tree, which I'm sure I'm going to get a lot more into Hercules club later. Really neat plant. All right, so keep in mind that the above list is only the basic families of trees. In most any area, there's several varieties of oaks, pines, etc., which can be used interchangeably. When one considers how many people over time have died in the wilderness, perhaps due to the slip of a knife or a mistake with an axe, it brings to mind the Bible quote, "My people die for lack of knowledge." Y'all, I'm a huge George Herter fan. I've talked about him before. George Herter, sporting goods company between the 1940s and say 1970s. He wrote about 2 dozen books, about 300 pages each. He was just he was a genius, an eccentric. He made up a lot of stuff. He lied a lot, but he had a good time doing it. And if you read his books, you were in on the joke. So, you know, he wasn't lying maliciously. He was lying in a joking way. He wrote the Professional Guides Manual, and it was actually one of his serious books, and it teaches you everything basically you need to know about living in the wilderness, just living with nothing more than a hatchet and a fire starter. And he always said that. He repeated it over and over. People starve not for lack of food, but for lack of knowledge. Well, I'm going to tell you that people die from infection because of lack of knowledge. You look around you, there's so many things that can disinfect a wound. And of course, I've written a whole book on that. It's called The Medicinal Trees in the American South Mid Atlantic Region. So y'all can check that out if you want to. But perhaps the most useful family that we all have in our kitchens are the alliums. Garlic, onions, shallots, leeks, ramps. The entire family is strongly antiseptic and antibiotic. Throughout history, people have used garlic and onions to treat wounds and infections. Most often, onions have just been sliced and used as a poultice. However, the juice from onions and garlic is more effective from deeper wounds. Onions and garlic juice are also an excellent cure for earache and infection. You can simply drip the juice into an infected ear. It will help with an ear infection. In the Appalachian Mountains, the most valued herb of this family is ramps. Ramps are either wild leeks or wild garlic, depending on who you ask. The same plant's called ramsons in Europe, by the way. Ramps are among the first wild foods we can forage, popping up in the woods, usually in cool, shady areas near creeks, and lasting for just a few weeks. I mean, if you get ramps for more than 2 months, you're really lucky. Ramps have a strong, sweet garlic and leek flavor with very little heat. They're not hot like garlic. It can be a little warm if you just eat the bulb, by itself, but usually they're not. They're considered a blood cleanser and a preventative for colds and flu. Ramps and all wild onions may be used to disinfect wounds. These plants have a few lookalikes, though, but the following maxim will ensure choosing the right plant. If it looks like an onion and smells like an onion, it's an onion. If it doesn't smell like an onion, it's not an onion. No matter what it looks like. There are so many bulbs that look like onions when they're small that can be very poisonous, but if they smell like an onion, they're an onion. The same is true of the entire family. If they smell like onions, garlic, shallots, or leeks, they're alliums. Alliums all grow from bulbs, and we include chives in that. I totally forgot about chives. Any plant that grows from a bulb that does not smell like an allium could be poisonous and requires further identification. Now, personally speaking, where I live in the mountains, we have lily of the valley, which is a very useful herb. But it can slow the heart rate. It's a lot like digitalis. And if you go get a bunch of lily of the valley in the springtime and you think you're eating ramps, you can stop your heart and die. So you're very careful. Make sure it smells like an onion. Father Kunzel, the great Swiss priest who was an herbalist, said, and he was talking about the Alps, which the Alps are obviously much higher elevation than the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, but we get so many of the same plants, so I always find his stuff useful. He said, in our God-blessed mountains, wild and in abundance grows a wonderful blood-cleansing herb, the wild garlic called ramsons, as it's called in this part of the world. It tastes like strong chives, looks like the leaves of the dog rose. Maybe. I'm not sure it looks like the leaves of the dog rose, but anyway, he says it's immediately recognized by the taste, and that is true. It's like a mild, very rich, very strong smelling sweet garlic or leek. And just like here, he says in March it starts appearing in rich soil in shady places under trees, under hedges and at the edge of forests, down to the valley of the Alps. You cut the wild garlic like chives. And I guess he was using the tops, really, and throw a lot of it into the soup. And really, you should use the tops. The plant will regrow from the bulb if you cut the leaves, the tops. If you pull the whole bulb, you've killed the plant, obviously. So, yeah, it is definitely better to use the tops. If everybody got into harvesting ramps, they wouldn't have any because they're just that rare. He says it cleanses the whole body, dries out sick, tangled substances, and makes the blood healthy. Drives away and kills toxic substances. And, I cannot disagree with that. That's exactly the way the mountain folks, the old Appalachian folks that I grew up with, would describe ramps. And we even have ramp festivals where people eat so many raw ramps that they stink. And you will sweat the smell of garlic. Um, but, it will keep you from getting E. cold or flu throughout the entire year if you eat enough ramps in the spring. and I absolutely love them. I love them raw. I love them cooked. I will take them and chop them up and put in a little olive oil, salt and pepper, hot pepper, and serve them as like almost a chimichurri with blue cheese and ham as an Easter snack. I'm a ramp fanatic. I mean, honestly, I'm an absolute ramp fanatic. Pull out a couple of trout out of the stream, stuff them with ramps, a little salt and pepper, slice of lemon, grill them up. You're never going to find a better meal, honestly. All right, but another common category of plants that are strongly antiseptic are those that contain berberine. Berberine is an alkaloid found in plants that have bright yellow roots. These include golden seal, coptis, which is gold thread, Oregon grape, and barberry. You know, I've talked a ton about this in previous shows. In early America, golden seal was considered a cure-all and valued almost as highly as ginseng. It was severely overharvested, and today, uh, golden seal isn't endangered, but it's pressured, we'll say. And you really should, if you can, harvest another plant. Oregon grape and barberry and coptis are plentiful, and in a lot of cases, they actually work better than golden seal. I mean, I actually use Oregon grape um, far more than I ever would golden seal. I think it's stronger. I just think it's more potent. It works better for me. And of course, coptis is a small wildflower that's called gold thread because it has this little thread of a root and it has berberine just like the others. And that's a good one to grow in the garden. It really is. If you need golden seal, get some coptis seeds, grow them in the garden. I think strictly medicinal seeds has a Chinese coptis that's even more strong, more potent than our American coptis. It's like maybe $3 or $4 for a pack of seeds. I mean, why in the world would you spend 20 or $30 an ounce for golden seal, which is already being pressured, when you could just get some little flowers growing in your garden? Anyway, that's what I do. But a tea or tincture of any of these herbs that contain berberine, is strongly antiseptic. It's strongly antifungal as well. If you get a cut, if you have a wound, you soak it in a hot tea. That helps the tea get in there and just really clean that wound out. You can I've seen really bad infections just totally turned around. I mean, life-threatening infections totally turned around with berberine. Excellent stuff. And then you have calendula, pot marigold. That's actually pot marigold. There's several flowers called calendula. Um, Calendula is an antiseptic. It's good for wounds. It's just very soothing to the skin. Um, Elecampane is widely used in Europe. It's one of their herbs that has antiseptic and antibiotic properties, and it's used in a lot of formulas. Just really, really common. You'll see it in just about everything from asthma and bronchitis to cuts and rashes. It's a good one. Wintergreen or tea berry. The oil of wintergreen is what you're using. It's very antiseptic, but it can actually be absorbed through the skin if it's, you know, the essential oil of wintergreen, and that can be toxic to the liver. So I try to stay away from the essential oils in wintergreen. Just go with a tincture or a tea. Horseradish, that wonderful condiment that I use in so many things. I love horseradish. Um, just for instance, if you find some delicious wild mushrooms, take them home and clean them up, dry them off, give them a little dip in flour and, seasoned flour, salt and pepper, a little Creole season if you like, whatever. Deep fry them, and then take some horseradish, mix in a little mayo, and maybe a pinch of mustard. Usually a pinch of Worcestershire is what I like. Worcestershire sauce. Okay. In England, they actually say Worcestershire. So anyway, you know what I'm talking about, that good brown fermented sauce. And the hotter the horseradish, the better. You dip that in there, and it's so good. I mean, you can put fried mushrooms in there, fried zucchini. I mean, whatever. It's just absolutely delicious. But it's also high in thymol. It's antiseptic. It is a strong antiseptic. It's very good for us. Common tansy is one I use, but tansy is actually very poisonous. The essential oil, a few drops of it can kill a full-grown man. Tansy is an old herb. It's one that's been used in European herbalism for a long time, but you got to be very careful with it. I like it though. I think tansy is a very nice herb. Spearmint, just regular mint, spearmint, peppermint. They all are antimicrobial. They have antiseptic properties. There again, you'd use a tea or a tincture would be even better because you get the alcohol plus the herb. Hops. Hops that are used to bitter beer um, are also a beer preservative because they're antimicrobial and antiseptic. Hops are just such a great herb. Um, you know, they say that people who go out in the fields to pick hops often fall asleep in the fields. If you have trouble relaxing or sleeping, um, you can make a little pillow of hops buds, or you could make a little sitting area and grow hops vines over it and just enjoy being out there on an afternoon and probably fall asleep in an area where you know is far more antiseptic and cleansed and pure than any hospital room. I can't think of maybe hops and lavender, which also has some antiseptic qualities. If you had these two things growing around you, and maybe some sage or mugwort, which has often been burned to kill germs in the air, um, fumigate a room where someone who is sick has been. What is that? I mean, it's going to cost you maybe $4 or $5 to grow all this stuff from seeds, and you could have a nice little sitting area under an arbor or even inside. I mean, I don't know that you want to grow hops in pots. It's a fairly big plant, but imagine that your sick room, essentially, your place that you go to recover and recuperate, could be absolutely antiseptic and antibacterial and antiviral and also incredibly peaceful and relaxing and would smell real nice from the lavender. And you could have a nice little beer garden out there. Why not, right? Get some hops in your beer too. Thyme. Now, thyme is just a very common kitchen herb, but the entire family is strongly medicinal. Um, It is antibacterial, it's antiseptic, and it's also an expectorant. It helps remove the mucus from the lungs. So thyme is just a wonderful herb. The little bit we usually put on meats, which is delicious, absolutely, isn't really enough to do what you want. You want to take like a whole ounce of dried thyme and make a tincture out of it, and then just take a teaspoon, in the morning when you wake up, and you'll be amazed how your lungs just clear out. It's a wonderful herb. So, that's it for our antiseptic herbs. I'll probably get in some more in later issues, later episodes, but for a basic starting place for herbs that are antiseptic, I don't see how you could go wrong with any of these. And for our family of herbs this week, let's just go with uh, we'll go with Thomas Elpel's book, Botany in a Day. With the birch family. Birch doesn't grow everywhere, but I just did a video on birch. You can find it on my Herbal Medicine 101 series on Rumble. This is Betulaceae. Now we know birch. Birch is paper birch. The bark peels off like paper. Birch is silver birch. It absolutely shines in the woods. I look for it in the winter, when the snow's on the ground. It's just like gleaming out there. And that's where I look for chaga mushrooms. There's river birch, there's black birch. Birch is so easy to spot. The leaves are, kind of oval shaped, but they're dentate, they're toothed. Mr. Elpel says the birch family includes deciduous trees and shrubs with simple, toothed, alternate leaves with neatly pinnate veins. And pinnate means like a feather. So if you look at the veins of the leaf, they look like, feathers. Male and female catkins form separately in the same bush. You can identify a birch. I'm not going to get into that. So the birch family includes alder. Alder is very astringent and the bark is most potent. The live inner bark from alders quickly turns a flaming orange-brown color when exposed to air. The color is from tannic acid, of course. It produces uh, brilliant and permanent dyes. Some Native Americans even dyed their hair with it. Other species of alder may produce darker colors. Medicinally, the alder can be used as a potent astringent for wounds, diarrhea, and so forth. Some species produce anti-tumor properties similar to those of the birches. It may be possible to make a syrup from the sap of large alders. Now, birch proper is betula. A tea of the leaves or twigs can be used externally as an astringent wash or internally for diarrhea or boils. A tea of the twigs is somewhat anthelmintic. That means it helps you get rid of worms and such. All right, the trees can be tapped for syrup, just like maple in the early spring. The sap is 50 to 60 parts water to 1 part syrup, so it must be boiled down to get the syrup. The birches contain some amount of menthol salicylic oil, like willow, making them diaphoretic and analgesic. The bark and twigs are chopped and then simmered overnight and distilled. It is commonly substituted for wintergreen oil. A strong tea of the bark or leaves can be used externally as a wash for poison ivy or acne, or internally as a mild sedative. The bark can be boiled and then folded into a variety of useful containers. That's true. I mean, mountain folks used to make baskets and even backpacks out of them. Even buckets, I mean, water buckets were made out of birch bark. A compound called betulinic acid derived from the bark is being tested on some types of skin cancer. So, what is the main property of the birch really is for most people is that wintergreen type oil. Um, it is very much like salicylic acid, which is aspirin. So you can take twigs, well, you can actually eat the leaves in the spring as a pot herb. You can take the twigs and make a tea out of them. That tea will help internally with aches and pains and arthritic joints and all that stuff and fevers. That's what the diaphoretic means. Um, but also it can be used externally in baths and washes for all kinds of wounds and swellings and sunburns and you name it. But for really the main part of American history, the huge, like super popular property of birch was that sap and the twigs because people would make root beer out of it. You know, the sap rises in the spring, and yeah, you can boil it down into a syrup like maple, but there's a lot of water in it. So our ancestors, especially George Washington, he was a huge fan of birch beer, and so many others would take several gallons of birch sap, which is mostly water, but with some sugar from the tree, and add to it some honey, and they would use the twigs to get that wintergreen flavor, and then they put their yeast in there, and they would make a very strong birch beer, probably about 20% alcohol, and that's what our country ran on. I mean, there were times in the history of the United States when Continental soldiers were paid partially in birch beer. Just a nice, alcoholic beverage that was far cleaner than the water they could get out of the creeks. That was simply the fermented sap of birch with a few additives. So, y'all, I know I've wandered far afield today. I've talked about a lot of subjects, and like I said, I may have lost half my audience. I can't do anything about that. If you're a Biden devotee, if you think he has the right to be a dictator or a god, um, I'm sorry, but I can't pretend that what's happening isn't happening. Um, 200 plus years of American history is being flushed down the toilet in the blink of an eye by a senile, desiccated, brain dead moron who was never bright and is apparently being run by outright communists now. And, if you have actually read any real history of the 20th century, you know that communism has resulted in approximately 200 million intentional deaths of their own citizens, of the very people that the people's revolutions were supposed to protect. Communism is an evil thing. So, if you're still with me and you enjoyed my show, I'm going to ask you this one time. I've never done this before. Could you tell a friend about it? Because if I just lost half my audience by speaking the truth, then maybe your friends and family could replace them. And if you'll do that, and if you'll help us grow this community, this network of free thinking, natural living, natural order, God fearing people, I'd sure be grateful. Like I said, It's been a lot of sacrifices to get to this point, and I'm actually now an herbalist for a living, and that means I have to sell books and I have to have people listen to my podcast, and I need to teach some classes. And if you can help me grow this network, I would be very grateful. Just this past week, I've gotten involved in a couple of prepper uh, networks, a couple of prepper websites, and I've always said I'm not really a prepper; I'm more of a homesteader. But this is a whole group of people that just are really interested in herbal medicine because if like what a lot of economists are saying, next month supply chains are totally disrupted, or people lose their jobs because they cannot, for one reason or another, take the vaccine, they're going to need herbal medicine to survive. So I'm going to ask you just, this one time. Not saying I won't ever ask again, but I don't think I have asked to this point in an entire year now. Yes, yes, we are. I've been doing this for a year. Um, I've never asked people to share the show, but I'm going to ask you to share the show this time. And y'all, I always say have a great week. Get out and enjoy. Gosh, this beautiful fall weather. It's gorgeous. I finally stopped raining and it's just beautiful out here. But stay free. Yeah, you do have that freedom. Keep it, appreciate it, cherish it, be willing to sacrifice for it if that's what need be. That's a hard one to say. If that's what need be, um, just don't don't give up what our ancestors died for. I'm telling you, people, don't give up what our ancestors died for. All right. See you next week.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.